Okay. I feel like I need to burp. Hold on. We're going to keep this in.
Let's get like all the sounds out.
It's up floating. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Sisters podcast. Guess what, guys? The both of us are here today.
Yay!
I'm excited. Well, okay, so Nichole, we're at time of recording. It's pretty late in the evening, and we both just showered. And
no, I didn't shower. I'm sitting in my filth.
Oh, okay.
Because I need to wash my hair, so I have to shower after.
Oh, okay. Well, then I misunderstood that. I was like, why is she washing half of herself and then half washing?
No, that's why I said let's move it up, because I was like, I don't want to go shower and then jump in the shower again. I was like, I'm just going to sit in it for a while. It's fine.
Okay. So anyways,
don't judge people.
For those of you watching on YouTube anyway, those just listening on audio, you're good.
Like bread still.
But all this to say, I'm excited to be recording with you because I know we just recorded last week, if I remember correctly, but it feels like it's been some time.
We didn't record last week.
Did we not? Was it the
you
week
recorded?
Before?
I didn't. I couldn't make it.
Was it? But did we record together a couple of days before that?
Did we? I don't think so. Did we? I don't know.
I've lost all sense of time.
Everything's a blur.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, here in the United States, because we do have some out-of-country listeners, thank you for listening. The season's just really interesting because we're about 3 weeks out of the election. And I'm just seeing people just get weird. So, I don't know. It's just a different vibe around here right now.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh my gosh, hold on. We had a few things happen. Happy belated birthday, Callie.
Hey, yes, Libra.
You share a birthday with my egg donor, but I love you. I love you more than her. You make up for
those born on that
hot
day.
Mess.
Oh, okay.
And let's see, when this comes out, it's going to be the day after our bestie's birthday. So happy birthday, bestie. Happy belated birthday also.
Yeah. We love you.
And what else? What else is in October?
Which season?
I feel like there was something else, no?
I know, but we got to do something for Halloween because that's coming up.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
But we'll do another Sam Hain episode about the Celtics.
Stop. We never said that.
We did.
Well, the basketball team is actually, like, they actually are the Celtics. They're not Celtics. Yeah. They're the Boston Celtics. Yeah, so
I've heard it
entirely.
I've heard it both ways, and I heard it recently, and I was like, "Oh, see, we're not that wrong." Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. Today, I was like, "Well, we're in spooky season, and I kind of wanted to try to do something spooky-ish. But it's not spooky, but it's dark. So we're gonna talk about the Dark Night of the Soul." For spooky season, sort of. Gabs, what is a dark night of the soul?
Okay, I'm going to give you the definition for sure, but I want to know before I explain the definition if you knew what a dark night of the soul was before you went through yours.
No.
Would you have associated with the other part of this conversation, which is clinical depression?
No, I think it was more of, I don't know, like a mentee bee or like a...
Is that what it is?
I don't know. Yeah, it's like a mentee bee or like a midlife crisis. I don't know. It's just like a crisis. It was just... No. I called it an existential crisis. That's what it was to me. And then I learned about the Dark Night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so the Dark Night, I feel like we have like maybe an earlier episode of said topic, but this one's going to be a little bit different.
Well, we did what is a spiritual awakening, episode 2. If you're new here, maybe don't listen to that.
The first 10, just ignore.
I mean, the first 90, whatever. But so we talked about the Dark Night of the Soul in there. just as far as like spiritual awakening, period. But this is specific to the dark night of the soul. Because I have said before, like, y'all are just depressed and you just don't want to say you're depressed. I may have a slightly different view, but we'll get into that when we get further into the discussion.
Okay, love that. Okay, so a dark night of the soul, from a spiritual perspective, it's often described as a season of deep spiritual crisis or transformation. And it is pretty much a period of time. I don't know that there's an exact period of time. It's definitely different for every single person. I think for me now, reflecting back, I was like, oh, there was like a solid year there where I thought I was losing my mind. But it's a season of time in which people feel like they've lost feelings and or are devoid of meaning. And with respect to their lives, I should say. And this is where individuals may question their purpose, their values, and the very nature of their existence on planet Earth.
So, we're going to also be kind of talking about clinical depression because I have said before that I think it's the same thing. And I actually think now maybe they go hand in hand. So, I think maybe a dark night of the soul could come first. And I don't even think there needs to be an order. And then maybe the depression can set in because of everything that's going on. Or vice versa. I think somebody could be depressed and then kind of question everything, which maybe leads them into a dark soul. So I almost kind of think that they can go hand in hand, but I think oftentimes people are probably experiencing both of them together. So a dark night of the soul can also just kind of mirror mental health issues, right? So we all know about depression, we know about anxiety. I said earlier an existential crisis, a MNTB, right? Something like that. But just kind of like that feeling of disconnect, like from yourself, from other people, from just your environment in general. One thing about depression and anxiety, so what was the number? It's something like, and this is an old stat, so it might be incorrect now, but something like 40 million American adults experience anxiety.
That makes sense.
That's a lot, right?
That's
And
a
this
lot.
is an old stat, so it might be higher now because I think a lot of these numbers went up during the pandemic, right?
100%. And I'm
Totally.
sure, yeah, and also like the nature of modern day work where we're just working more online these days, using our phone, being on our computers, just using these pieces and tools that require us to be on the internet. I'm sure that contributes to anxiety as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
So oftentimes someone might be experiencing so much anxiety that it leads to depression. So they're kind of like BFFs. They go hand in hand a lot of the time. So you'll see a lot of people with anxiety and depression together also. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind as we talk about the rest of this.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of hit it from both angles. Gabs is going to talk about the spiritual component. So she's going to focus more on the dark night. I'm going to focus more in my wheelhouse with like the clinical stuff. So a dark night and depression might look and feel really similar, but there might be like little nuances that separate them. So what is like somebody's maybe overall experience of a dark night?
I was thinking as you were speaking, I was like, I feel like I'm going to have a different interpretation of Dark Knight and depression after we speak, which probably is the point of this episode.
That's totally the point. Good job.
Yeah. And thinking back, I was like, I just had this thought. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was both. Like, I'm pretty sure my Dark Knight went hand in hand with depression. But at the time, I don't think I had like the language to describe that I was depressed, even though I am pretty much like very emotionally aware. But I think when you're so in it, it's like hard to make sense of said feelings and how to associate or categorize them.
Is it that you didn't have the language or that you didn't have the The desire to like admit to it, because I think for a lot of people, they don't want to admit. It's like they know, but they don't want to say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, or sometimes people overuse the word depressed.
Yeah.
I'm depressed when really they're just sad.
I probably sad. But I think it was a combination of the episode we just did, which is the witch wound. Just go back a couple and listen to that. But I mean, I knew I wasn't okay during my spiritual awakening, aka Dark Night of
Dark
the
night.
Soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I did seek help. And I did go and start therapy, and I did actually do it for a good period of time. But I also found, and this came up in our discussion with Marley Rose Harris, also go back about maybe 20 episodes or so. And she was saying something to the business model of, clinical therapy. And she was like, you can manipulate your therapist. And I definitely felt like I manipulated my therapist in some sense. So it's like, I mean, I knew I wasn't okay, but I knew I was like seeking support and also at the same time developing my tools and building up my toolbox to navigate the dark night of the soul. But I would not be surprised now reflecting back if it was both. And to describe what I was feeling, I didn't feel like I was seen. I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like, what is the purpose of us on planet Earth? And what is the purpose of planet Earth in general?
Yeah.
Are angels, demons, entities real? They are. Just crazy shit like that.
Okay. So let's try to maybe explain a little bit the differences between what a dark night might feel like and then what depression might feel like.
Well, according to the lovely summary that you've put together, dark night could be a spiritual awakening disguised as emotional turmoil. And it is in time of intense reflection and growth. And I definitely agree with that, because it was very much like, I was like at least an solid 8 to 12 months of intrusive thoughts.
So I like that this piece speaks of the emotional turmoil, because a spiritual awakening isn't always difficult and there isn't always that kind of turmoil, right? There are parts of it that are kind of fun and exciting and new, but it's that piece that that dark night of the soul piece that isn't fun. And that is just like, oh my God, this is so much. This is heavy and I don't like this.
What was yours like?
No, it was totally that. It was like an existential crisis. I was just like, what the fuck is happening in my life? Totally.
Wait, this was 8 months into you being a newly married woman, right? It was like the end of 2022? Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah.
22, beginning of 23, because that's how you started it, right? Right before we started the podcast.
Yeah, that's how the podcast was born.
Nichole's Dark Night. You're all welcome.
I meant to be brought about this. So depression is going to feel like a little bit similar to a spiritual awakening, kind of like that emotional turmoil, but it's going to be a little bit heavier and it's going to feel like more stagnant, like it's not going anywhere, it's not getting better. And there isn't going to be maybe a feeling or a sense of, oh, like this is going to end really well. Like I know that this is for a greater purpose. I know that I'm going to come out of this better. There maybe isn't always that with depression. It's kind of just like, oh my God, this is like so hard. When is this going to be over? When am I going to feel better? This is awful.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like what you just described, like a sense of heaviness. Like you really don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
No,
like your brain physically can't process that.
Right. And with the spiritual awakening, you can probably sense that, right? Like, okay, like I know that this is for my greater good. I know that I'm learning a lesson. I know this is meant to teach me something. You don't have that awareness or the ability to see things that way when you're actually clinically depressed. And so you might have some of the same symptoms, right? So isolation's a big one. Feeling like a sense of dread and despair, and then a deep questioning of life's meaning. Like, so for you, what the fuck are we doing here on this planet? But again, with the spiritual awakening, the whole point of it is like your spirit is going to evolve. You're going to grow from this. But with depression, it's, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to grow from this, but I probably need some medication. I need some therapy. I need something more to help me through this. versus a dark night. Oh, I can see some spiritual healers. I can pull some cards. I can throw some crystals in my bra. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to look very different.
Yeah, and I think that there's also, and I hope this episode's going in the direction in which you had hoped it to, but I do think that it's hard to not have that kind of like optimistic perspective about like, oh, like, I'm going to just throw some cards down or I'm going to work with crystals until you understand maybe like the emotional aspect of it first that might be associated with being depressed. And I also want to add, like, I am actually very grateful for those seasons in my life because I don't think if I could go back and change it, I probably wouldn't.
Oh, that's interesting. So I wonder, though, somebody that was maybe experiencing clinical depression might not say that, right?
Well, how would you feel, Nichole? How do you feel about yours?
I don't want to go back and experience that. Maybe a dark night, but not depression, right? It's like, that's awful. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to see anyone. I'm tired all the time. Like, who wants to re-experience that? That sounds awful.
I think it serves my Cancerian side very well, like that part of it. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm good without people. Like 2020 didn't bother me. I was so good, like in the house. It's like my natural state of being. So,
But there's a difference between I enjoy being alone versus I'm alone because I don't want to be around anybody because I don't feel good.
facts.
So there's like that slight difference to it.
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference between being an introvert by choice versus like, I have no control over this, but I don't want to see people.
Do you think that a dark night can, like what you get out of a dark night, like the tools that you create for yourself, can support you in a depressive state?
It could, but sometimes when someone's in a depressive state, they can't access those tools. They don't have the motivation, they don't have the energy, they don't have just the intention to do that.
Okay. So, what are some signs in which you might be experiencing a dark night?
Okay, you tell us and then I'll tell you signs that you might be depressed.
Well, okay. For the dark night, the first one that we have listed, a deep sense of loss or emptiness. So you might feel as though you're missing something within yourself, within your life, maybe missing a person, but you can't quite pinpoint what it is. And this can also show up and or manifest as you feeling disconnected from your soul's calling or your soul's purpose, disconnected from relationships, or even disconnected from yourself. And it can also be this sudden sense of what previously brought you happiness and joy and meaning may not do so anymore. And you might feel hollow in those said spaces.
Right. So thinking about people like you who got a lot of like meaning from work and what they did for work. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't give a fuck about this anymore. Like, this isn't important to me.
Yeah.
So.
I associated a lot of my self-worth with work, and that has been a lot of rewiring and reprogramming in the last couple of years, and I still don't know if I'm like 100% there, to be honest. So,
yeah.
Okay. The second sign that you might be experiencing a dark night is that you are questioning your beliefs and your values. And so during a dark night of the soul, the beliefs and the values that once guided you may come into question. And you may find yourself reevaluating your faith, your spirituality, or your life path. Nichole, I want to know if this applies to you. And this deep questioning can possibly feel unsettling, uncomfortable, and it also forces you to confront long held assumptions, beliefs about yourself and the world at large.
You know, this really reminded me. So, yes, I can agree with that. It resonates with me, but it reminded me of Brett. Hey, Brett. Because Brett spoke to the fact that they were pretty, faithful Catholics. And all of a sudden, right, they started questioning things. I don't think I had a very strong faith. Like, I don't go to church. I wasn't doing any of that.
But we were definitely Catholic. I mean,
we were. Yeah, totally.
I still identify as Catholic.
No, I do, but also I wasn't going to church and going to confession, to get the Eucharist, right? I wasn't doing any of that. But it did make me question my life path. So, yeah, I kind of see I first thought of Brett, but I also can see where I started questioning like my path in life. Like, do I really want to do this forever? This sounds awful. I can't keep doing this.
And you're referring to your 9 to 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the result of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Another sign might be feelings of isolation. And so you might experience a season or an intense sense of loneliness, even when you're surrounded by other people. And it truly might feel like, no one really understands what you're going through. You may not feel seen or heard. And that in turn can cause you to maybe withdraw from social engagements, interactions, or even relationships with other people, platonic or intimate. And this isolation often stems from a desire to maybe just go inward, retreat, and also seek answers within yourself. And that prompts me to say that's kind of just an opportunity to connect with your intuition, because when you're really seeking answers from yourself, it's really just leaning into and hearing what your intuition has to say for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about that before I progress?
Mm-mm.
Okay. The second to last sign for you
Number
potentially
4.
having a dark night of the soul. Number 4, emotional turmoil or intense anxiety. I remember this. Yeah, that was a lot. A dark night of the soul often brings with it overwhelming emotions, including sadness, anxiety, fear. Fear is a really big one, and/or despair, and maybe all of them at once. And they can feel all consuming, possibly difficult to escape. And it might feel as though you're on an emotional roller coaster of sorts, which that's a really great way of describing it. And you can also possibly feel as if you've lost control, which control is a way to feel safe. And you might also feel as though you're stuck in an unending cycle of darkness, which might be very similar to depression.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite, but similar.
Yep.
And the final fifth sign is a desire for deeper meaning. So even though everything feels possibly uncertain or painful, you know that there's an underlying pull or reason for you to possibly be finding a deeper meaning of truth. And there also might be a strong sense or urge to seek out spiritual answers or connection with something greater than yourself, like a power that's greater than yourself, oftentimes referred to source or God. And whether or not that's meditation, prayer, or philosophical exploration, those are ways in which you can connect to said power. And this desire is often what's like a motivating pull or what's driving you forward, even when you feel like you're kind of in the thick of it and the darkness of it all.
So this already feels so different to the signs of clinical depression, but I still think, I think they really go hand in hand. So some signs that you might be experiencing clinical depression. So 5 signs. So number
Can I ask
1
a question
is,
real quick?
yeah.
If you want to go through the signs first, but I just don't want to forget it. I would love to know if you, as a therapist, have had a client who was not depressed, but instead going through spiritual awakening and having a dark night.
I think I had a couple, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many. Yeah.
Okay.
So 5 signs. So the first one might be persistent sadness or low mood. So one of the things that we're looking for when we're trying to diagnose or rule out depression is this just persistent sadness, feelings of hopelessness, just kind of feeling empty. You don't have like any reason to feel this way. You just kind of feel this way. And it can make even just the smallest little thing feel overwhelming. So it can make it's not even a small thing, but trying to get up out of bed every day, right, can just feel like too much. Trying to do your daily tasks feel like too much. The second sign is going to be a loss of interest or activity. So all of a sudden, you just don't have any desire to do the things that you once enjoyed. So maybe you were somebody who loved scrapbooking and you're like, I have no desire to do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you were somebody who loved going hiking and you're like, I don't want to go hiking. I don't want to put my hiking boots on. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to do any of that. Maybe you liked to watch TV, listen to podcasts, and all of a sudden, like all those things just feel like a little too overwhelming. So that is one of the other really big things that we look for. When I get through the 5 signs, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about one of the scales that we use. And it might sound familiar to some people. So the third thing is that there's changes in your sleeping patterns. So you might be sleeping too much, sleeping too little, or just feeling really tired, even though maybe you've slept enough. So you might have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping too much, sleeping too little. Just your sleep is off. And what happens when we don't sleep? Like, we go crazy. Did anybody see that movie? What was it called? Insomnia? Where
I was
I
just
think
going
it
to say
was
that
like Al
insomnia.
Pacino, right? And I mean, he literally went crazy because like that's what happens when we don't sleep. So any kind of changes in sleep patterns is another really big sign. And also what happens when we sleep too much? Like we don't always feel rested. We feel like more tired, right?
Yeah, totally. Oh, but I'm like, I love sleeping. So it is a thing, though. It's true. And it's also a sign
Mm-hmm.
of depression, sleeping too much.
It is. The fourth sign is feeling fatigue and not having a lot of energy. So you can have slept the perfect amount of time and you still don't have energy. You can't get out of bed, you can't shower, you can't brush your teeth, you can't do any of those things. And so you can drink all the coffee in the world and it's still not going to help. So that can be another really big sign. And I've worked with people before that, and I don't know if it really connects to the feeling of fatigue or if it's more so the loss of interest, not even loss of interest, but I've had people come in that are like, I haven't showered in like 2 weeks. I haven't brushed my teeth in a month. I haven't brushed my hair in God knows how long, right? Because they're so in it. They might not be getting out of bed, right? They're maybe only getting out of bed to use the restroom, but they're not doing anything else, right? They're not tending to their own hygiene. So that's
Yeah,
another really big one.
I feel like I have a new sense of like, uh, I don't know, empathy. Empathy is the right word for said people that are experiencing depression because it's true. Like once you're in it, it's like your brain, like quite literally, can't process doing anything more than what it's capable of doing for energetic purposes.
hmm And these are just kind of like 5 signs, but I'll give you guys a couple more. So, sign number 6 could be a change in your body weight. So, maybe you're losing a bunch of weight or you're gaining a bunch of weight. So, like changes in your eating pattern, right? You're overeating, you're undereating, you're binge eating. It could be something like that. So, that's another really big sign that we're screening for also when we're trying to determine if somebody's depressed or rule it out.
Hmm.
And then on the extreme end of it, are you having thoughts of harm, self-harm? Are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you really struggling with those thoughts of like being able to keep yourself safe? That's like another really, really big one that we're looking for.
Hmm.
So, have you ever been to the doctor and they give you a PHQ-2? Have you ever seen those? You might not
Mm-mm.
know it by its name.
Mm-mm.
I had noticed this. We went to the same doctor. Oh God, the doctor that we didn't like, that male doctor.
Yeah. You know
Okay.
why? Okay, I have to tell people why we didn't like him. Well, for I didn't like him for reproductive purposes because I did not feel seen in that period of time. As many know, I've had issues with my sacral chakra and my ovaries and all the things, but we're good now. And I didn't like him for that, and you didn't like him because he didn't really know what tonsil stones were. Who doesn't know what tonsil stones are?
He couldn't diagnose a cold sore.
Oh, yeah, that too.
I had a cold sore. He couldn't diagnose a cold sore.
I forgot about that. I was thinking
That's
about the
why I
fucking
was like,
tonsil stone.
you're like useless.
Yeah, we're not
Anyway,
paying you 200 a visit for this.
so I had noticed when I had gone to see him, I think for the first time, or at least in that office, they had a PHQ-2, and a PHQ-2 is a patient health questionnaire with 2 questions. And so the 2 questions that are on there is over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following problems? So number 1 is little interest or pleasure in doing things. And I think that was sign number 1 or 2 that we talked about. And then the scoring is not at all, several days, more than half the days, so like 4 or more days, or nearly every day, which is going to be like 6 or 7 days a week I'm feeling this way. The second question on there is, how often have you felt down, depressed, or hopeless? And so it's those same kind of scoring. So depending on how somebody scores on this, so keep an eye on this, guys, next time you're at your doctor's office. Not all of the doctors do this, but it is a way for them to screen to see if somebody needs maybe further screening. At which time, if you score higher on this, so I would say if you're scoring even several days, maybe, I would say several days, more than half the days for sure, nearly every day, of course. That's going to prompt them to maybe give you a PHQ-9. And the PHQ-9 is what we use in practice to diagnose clinical depression. So one of the requirements to be able to diagnose somebody is they have to score either more than half the days or nearly every day on those 2 questions. So it has to be in that higher range. They have to have one of those 2 indicators there, in addition to us kind of seeing what else might be going on sprinkled in there. So are they having difficulty sleeping? Are they fatigued? Are they having a hard time concentrating? Are they having thoughts of suicide or self-harm? So it's kind of like a precursor to, oh shoot, I think I skipped one, sorry. It's kind of a precursor to the more full screening. Sorry, I think I skipped number 5. So the fifth sign is you're having a hard time concentrating or making decisions. So you can't concentrate at work. You can't concentrate on your schoolwork. You can't concentrate on the TV show you're watching. You can't concentrate on watching your kids play, a game or engaging in their sport. Like, you just can't do that. You can't make decisions. You just really, really have a hard time with that piece. So that could be the other part of it. One of the signs. Again, in the PHQ-9, we have 9 different things we're looking for. We're just listing off 5, and then I think I threw in a few bonuses.
I know which form you're talking about.
Did you see it there? Do you remember?
I saw it at my gyno.
Yeah, so I think they might be throwing those in there as a way just to see, okay, how are people doing? And I think that was pre-pandemic. So I'm wondering now, post-pandemic, if it's something that's more common. Like, how are people doing, like, mental health-wise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it. I didn't see it. I started going to my gyno after the pandemic, actually, yeah. And to that point, I saw that form during that time.
So can you kind of, like, see the difference between the dark night and, like, the clinical depression? Like, how maybe, like, the differences, but also maybe how they can go hand in hand?
Totally.
And how maybe a dark night can cause depression?
Yes, I'm so glad you just said that, because the dark night, I was leaning into elements of depression, given some of the examples that you just spoke to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. So all this might be happening, and then what? Well, it's like, shit, okay, am I going to just raw dog this and do it alone? Or do I need some kind of support? And the support might look different, right? So the support that somebody might get in a dark night of the soul is going to maybe be like more spiritual type of support. Spiritual coaches, intuitives, what else?
A close group of I guess this falls into the therapist categories, but just like people, like a close group of friends, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Just people that you can really like share all your shit with.
Mm-hmm.
And that have the space to hold for you in said period of time where you're going through it, because it's also important to honor people's feelings and boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And if someone's in a mental health crisis, they're still going to need the support system. Like, a support system is so huge. That's one of the things that we're checking for when people are coming in. Okay, like, who do you have to lean on for support? Who do you have around you? Who can you call if you're having a rough time? Or who can you call if you are having thoughts of self-harm, right? So support system for sure. But also they might need to take a little bit further, right? They might need a therapist. They might need a support group. They might need even medication. And I have so many, well, not anymore because I work with the littles, but I had so many adults that were so anti-medication that I had to really work with them on being okay with taking medication. And so, what do you think, like, one of the first things was, or one of the things that they would maybe say? Like, hey, maybe some medication might help. It might be time for meds. What do you
They were
think they would tell
probably
me?
resistant. Probably did
Yeah,
not want that.
but
But I was
why?
just thinking, I was like, you would probably do a really good job of like making them see a different or altering perspective in which it might be really supportive, because I know people that have gone through the dark night that has led to bouts of depression, and they were in maybe periods of time, and it's more than just one person where I've seen this happen, where it's like, maybe the medication would actually be really helpful. And you're not going to hear that from spiritual community people. They're going to be more than likely they gear towards the sides of it not being
They're going to be like maybe
the best.
anti-medication, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
A-
The
and that
community
kind of,
stereotypically, sorry, let me just say this,
yeah.
stereotypically speaking, is very anti-pharma. And I'll say I'm very hybrid. Like I see both sides. So
Well, it reminds me of Gabby Bernstein, right?
yeah, she said it too.
In her book Happy Days, she talks about how she was always preaching no medication, no medication, no medication. She had her baby. She had some pretty intense postpartum and was like anti-meds. And finally, they convinced her that she needed the medication. And then she kind of had to, like, she didn't want to, right? And when she gave into it and was like, okay, I need to because I'm not okay, she, she kind of talks about like, I probably did a lot of damage by being so anti-medication over the years. And,
Oh,
because people looked up to her,
yeah,
it
it's
was
true.
like, well, shit, like medication probably is really helpful. But she talks about how she kind of regretted that she was so like anti-meds when she realized that
Uh-huh.
it was helpful for her.
I remember hearing her on a podcast talking about that exact thing. And I definitely feel like it's bio individual just because everyone's so different within their bodies, within their beliefs. But I don't think that, I think, like you just said, I think using Gabby Bernstein as an example, it's definitely necessary in some instances.
So here's what I would tell clients, because I'd be like, hey, what do you think about medication now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be on medication because I don't want to have to be on this for the rest of my life. That was like the
Yeah.
first thing that I would hear. I'd say, okay. And so I would always use the example of somebody who has health issues. So somebody
Mm-hmm.
who has high blood pressure, somebody who maybe has just some kind of health condition, right? So if somebody has a health condition, they have high blood pressure, what is a doctor going to tell them? They're probably going to tell them they need to change their diet, they might need to exercise a little bit, and they're going to probably need this medication to help bring it down.
Mm-hmm.
So if that person is able to focus on eating better and exercising, and they're able to get that under control, even with the medication, there's going to come a point where they're probably not going to need the medication because they've been able to get their diet in check. They've been able to start moving a little bit more, and the medication isn't going to be necessary. So I'm telling them it's the same thing with a mood stabilizer, like an antidepressant. You're going to learn other skills while you're on the medication. You're going to go to therapy. You're probably going to increase your social contacts. You're going to have more energy. Maybe you're going to start taking more walks. Like, you're going to learn coping skills. You're going to understand yourself better, and you can
Mm-hmm.
eventually wean off of the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, I would say like 75% of the time, I was able to convince them to try it, and they would see the benefit. But then what happens is, oh, I stopped taking the medication because I felt better. Well, you felt better because of the medication.
Mm-hmm.
So they think, oh, well, I'm better now. I don't need this anymore. And then they go right back into it.
Did they develop? So, okay, the whole point is having like more energy, more motivation, capability to develop skills to get to a
Mm-hmm.
point where you don't need the medication,
Right.
right? Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
said skills were maybe not developed as much as they could have been, is what you're saying.
Maybe not. Right.
Okay.
It's just like, oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
And then some people would say, I've been on medication before and I just felt numb. Like I couldn't cry. Nothing made me sad. So they didn't like being devoid of like feeling, which I get. So, but there's also so many different medications, right? So the first one might not work. And they do have a lot of side effects. But that was always a big one I heard. I don't want to be hooked on this forever. Well, you're not.
I was just thinking,
I don't want to get addicted to it. I don't want to get addicted to it and be on it forever. They're not addictive, right? It's not like an anti-anxiety medication where those are addictive, right?
I was just thinking when you said that there's other side effects. I don't know why it popped into my mind, but I just saw something on one of like the health accounts that I followed. It's more holistic, and it's like, well, if you're horny, you're healthy, and one of the side effects of medication is libido changes.
Yeah. Or vivid dreams. That's another one. But I think those are kind of fun. I like vivid. I mean, I dream so vividly all the time, so vivid dreams don't really bother me. Okay, so what would be some tools that people could use to navigate their dark night of the soul?
I feel like dark night of the soul, I feel like they might blend, but dark night of the soul I feel like they're maybe all practical, but for me, they're very practical when it comes to tools to navigate the dark night of the soul. So the first one that comes to mind is journaling. I know you love your journal prompts, Nichole.
I love journaling, yeah.
Writing down your thoughts, feelings, communicating with your higher self. Another one is meditation, which is arguably more challenging because you really have to quiet the monkey brain, which is hard because, again, we're so stimulated in everyday life with phones, computers, work, etc. Connecting with your higher self, whichever way that looks like. So for me, I really enjoy taking walks without playing music or having something blasting in my ear. That is a way in which I connect to my higher self and just listen to my innermost thoughts. Spending time in nature, so walking in nature, just quite literally going to visit maybe like a beach or a mountain, going for a hike is really supportive as well. And then also just really trusting that there is a power that's bigger than yourself and that there's a consciousness, i.e. God source, Jesus, etc., that is bigger than you could imagine.
I think that's what really separates it is like, I know that this is for my higher good. I know this is for a purpose, where I don't think people that are in depression can say that. They're just like, why is this happening? And like, when is it going to be over?
Actually, yeah, that's a really important distinction, I would say. I agree with too. It's like, there is no light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, so they are really similar with like the same kind of tools you would use to navigate a dark night of the soul. You could use also in mental health. So therapy can be a big tool if you have access to it. I know a lot of people don't always have the access to it, unfortunately. Mindfulness practices. I would sometimes do like meditation with my clients in session at the beginning.
Oh, I love that.
I would do visualization with them. I had one client who really liked the sound of my voice. And so she's like, can you record this? It was like a progressive muscle relaxation. So we had a script and she's like, can you record this and send it to me? So she would play it at home whenever she needed it.
She was giving you a download/insight as to what you're going to be doing for your own business.
Maybe, yeah, because I was doing it, and I was like, what? She's like, your voice is just like so soothing to me, and whenever I'm having a hard time, like I just think of all the things you tell me in here. Like I have your voice in my head all the time.
Yeah, but I've told you that before, and other people have said that about you on the podcast. They really enjoy your voice.
Yeah, I know one person who doesn't. I'm sure. He's a Leo. He's dumb.
I was like, oh, the Leo King.
He's lame.
Be nice.
So that would be another one. So again, like meditation, therapy, visualizations, and then learning just kind of different techniques. Journaling is a big one. I would sometimes ask my clients to journal as well. I wasn't giving them big prompts, but it was just more of like, just kind of journal whatever's coming up for you and just see what it is that you're noticing. And then again, just like being very like gentle on yourself. Like there are so many causes for depression, right? It can be biological. There's an imbalance of like different neurotransmitters, right? Dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. Like when those are out of whack, good luck, and you have no control over that because you can't see what it looks like in there. You don't know what's happening. It could be passed down, right? It can be genetic. It can come from anyone. It can come from any family members, right? And maybe it skips generations. So maybe you think, oh no, like my mom was fine, my grandma was fine. Well, you don't know if your great grandma was, right?
That's
And
true.
they didn't really diagnose those things back then or talk about it. So maybe it skipped. And unfortunately, now you have it and you don't have any control over it. And then there's just other things that are happening, right? Just life. What's going on around you? Did you lose your job? Did you lose someone that you love? Did you end a relationship? Did you, it can be anything, right? Did you have to move somewhere and you don't know anybody? Was the move really hard? So there's so many different causes for it too. So kind of reminding yourself, okay, like I can get through this. I don't know when, but I can get through this. And if you've been there before, reminding yourself, I've been through this before and I've gotten through it.
I would say when it comes to the Dark Knight, the first one's the hardest and maybe the worst, but then once you've done it, it's not as bad because you have the tools to get through it.
Yeah. And then I think the final piece I want to say is there is still so much stigma around mental health. And that's why I was getting so frustrated with people like, oh, Dark Night of the Soul. And it's like, just say you're fucking depressed. It's fine. It is okay to say you're depressed. Like, I'm sure most people, I'm going to just throw a random number out there. I might be totally wrong, but I'm going to say at least like 90% of the population probably has at least one depressive episode at some point in their life. Oh, the other big piece I didn't mention with clinical depression, with all those signs, is those signs have to be present for at least 2 weeks. So that's why sometimes people are like, oh, I'm just so depressed. And it's like, well, you've been sad for 2 days. You're not depressed, right? Like, don't start throwing out clinical terms when you're just sad. That's not the same thing. Like, they have to be present for 2 weeks in order for it to qualify for depression. And it could be there longer. For kids, and we're not talking about kids, but if kids are like consistently depressed and have those signs for a year, they have what's called persistent depressive disorder. For adults, if you're feeling that way for 2 years, it's also called persistent depressive disorder. Those are kind of like my Eeyores, so if you kind of know like an Eeyore in your life and it's like, oh, okay, they might have that persistent depressive disorder where it's like, oh, this has been here for a long time. Let's also not confuse that though with like, this is just their personality. Like, they're just kind of like, this guy's gray,
you have a example of an Eeyore that we both know that you oftentimes refer to, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's just the personality,
right? But is it? So I think there's also that distinction that needs to be made. Is this a personality thing? Like, have they just kind of always been that way? Or is it a clinical thing that they haven't addressed? Because again, there's that stigma of, well, I can't say I'm depressed or I can't go see a doctor, right? So I think there's like, again, that kind of fine line of, is this just being kind of swept under the rug because it's easier that way? Or are they just kind of always down,
Totally.
They would be somebody who would need that rating scale that I was talking about. Because that's where we get the answers. Okay, so how long have you been feeling this way? 2 weeks? We already know it's 2 weeks because that's what it asks. Okay, well, what about a month? What about 6 months? And that's where you can kind of figure out how long it's been present. I don't know, it's been like a year. So at that point, they're not going to qualify.
Yes. Also, I'm just really seeing, as you're speaking, I'm just taking in what you're saying, the value of combining talk therapy in the clinical setting alongside developing the spiritual toolbox, like journaling, meditating, spending time in nature. Like, both lethal combination, like unstoppable, so healing,
totally.
and so supportive.
So now go back and, was it a dark night? Was it depression? Was it both? Was it a dark night that brought on depression? What do you think it was for you?
Dark night that brought on depression.
Do you think other people have that awareness or the ability to admit that? Maybe some people.
I think
Can you like think of
yeah.
one person that maybe could and then one person that couldn't?
Totally. However, I'm also seeing, and this is not to generalize, but I just had this conversation and I don't want to derail and go off tangent. But I was really just noticing that like females are more inclined to be emotionally aware and actually have the language and the vocabulary to identify that how they're feeling and express it, whereas sometimes, most oftentimes, actually men may not. And I feel like there's a lot of like cultural relation to that, and that's been such a fascinating thing I've been aware of, especially in my setting, my readings as of late. But actually, I want to ask you the same thing. So for you, was it depression that led to Dark Knight, vice versa, a combination of both? What was the segue?
I think it was depression that led to Dark Knight because there was a lot of like changes that were happening, right, in our life at that point. That was like, what the fuck? I don't know what to do. Like just feeling so scared. Maybe it wasn't even depression. It was probably more anxiety that led to the Dark Knight.
Yeah, I don't
But
think
I've said it before. Yeah, I mean, I say it to my therapist friends all the time, but I'm like, I've been depressed since like May of 2023. But I'm like a high functioning depressed person, you know? And it's like, and I was like, oh, I can pinpoint that it was all when the infertility stuff started. And that threw me for a loop. And it's like, yep. And they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I am. Because I know the PHQ-9 by heart. And I'm like, I can score myself and I know, like, I know what's going on. But, you know, I still shower, I still get up and do the things I need to do, but I don't want to do anything. I'm tired all the time. I have a hard time focusing. I'm like squirrel half the time. Like there's so many things. So yeah, it just is what it is. And
appreciate
it's
the
like,
honesty.
shit, when am I gonna be out of this? This is hard. Anyway, okay guys, we hope you learned something from this. So is it a dark night of the soul or is it clinical depression? And if it's clinical depression, reach out to me. Let me know. I can try to help connect you with the people that you need to be connected with. Unless you're in another country, I don't have any connections in other countries. But still reach out to me. We'll figure out something.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to pull today from the Angels and Ancestors deck. Gabs, you love this one.
I do. Yeah, it's pretty.
All right. We got Mountains. Stand your ground. What is that one?
Oh my
I've never gotten that one.
You know what? Well, please read what it says for just your general awareness, and then you can tell me either while we're recording or after. I mean, I have the deck, so I can go look myself. But it's so funny because right now, as you were pulling, I was seeing a phoenix in my third eye, and phoenix is like rebirth energy, transformation. But I actually just picked up this book, and Nichole, you should totally link this in the show notes. The Mountain is You, and it's a spiritual term that's been used for a long period, like forever. And it's pretty much like all you really have to overcome are just like internal feats within yourself. A lot of it's just like mindset and like limiting beliefs. And you can really progress and evolve to create the life that you want for yourself and to like literally be happier. So that's kind of what I interpreted from that card.
I'm listening to The Psychology of Money today, but it's a quick listen. So maybe when I finish that one, I'll see how long The Mountain is You is.
It's not long. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. We hope you enjoyed talking about dark nights and clinical depression. We hope it was as fun for you as it was for us.
Yep, totally. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.